Welcome to the Global Discussion, discussions with creatives, leaders, and thinkers. My name's Simon Hodgkins. A real pleasure today to be joined by Nikki Smith. Nikki, it's great to have you here on the show. Let's begin by asking you to introduce yourself to our worldwide audience. Tell us a little bit about your journey and everything you're involved in. So over to you, Nikki.
Okay, thanks ever so much, Simon. It's lovely to be here. My name is Nikki Smith. I'm an author. I write destination thrillers. I've had two books out already, but my latest is called The Beach Party, which is currently out now with Viking Penguin. My journey to publication, I'm sadly not a kind of 20-something-year-old debut. I'm a little bit older than that. I did an English degree many years ago at Birmingham University and loved it. But left during the recession and decided that I was going to be an accountant because they were one of the only companies that was still hiring people to work for them. So having done an English degree, I thought, well, how hard is it to do an accountancy qualification? And the answer to that is pretty hard. So I struggled for 3 years, but managed to get it. Got it first time actually, but it wasn't something that came naturally to me at all, and I can't say I loved it. I left the accounting firm that I trained with and went to work in the city. Worked for an investment bank for a while, which again was, I'd say, an interesting experience back in the early 90s, especially as a woman, and kind of on the trading. I wasn't actually trading myself, but I sat on the trading floor with a lot of the traders. And it was pretty brutal, quite cutthroat, probably as most people imagine it. And then I left when I had children. It wasn't the kind of job really then that industry was particularly supportive of people working kind of flexi time or part time. So I had a bit of a career break for a couple of years, and then I went to work for various different companies, including I worked for a property company, and I helped run a trampoline park, actually, interestingly, which is probably something that you don't get many people saying on your show. And then I'd always wanted to write. I kind of carried on writing in the background, but it wasn't anything that I showed people. I tried writing a novel after I left university, but I had no idea what I was doing. I think the results of it are actually currently in my loft somewhere, but they won't be coming out again. I had no idea how the publishing industry worked. I had no idea about editing. I didn't know really anything about getting an agent. So yeah, it went nowhere. But I'd always wanted to do it. So I kind of had a bit of a now or never moment when I was about 45, and my husband bought me a voucher for a Curtis Brown course, creative writing course, for Christmas. It wasn't something that you had to apply to go on. You could just kind of pay. It wasn't a huge amount of money at all. It was just a 3-week kind of introductory course. And I absolutely loved it. So I applied for a longer course, 3-month course, which was something that you had to go through a bit of a process for, and got a place on it. I was still working full time, but did the course in the evenings or very early in the morning. And that led me eventually to write the first draft of what turned out to be my debut novel. I edited it for a while and then went on to get an agent who is still my agent now, Sophie Lambert at C&W, which is kind of part of Curtis Brown. We subbed to publishers after I've been working with her for about 4 months, doing some more edits, and I was very fortunate in that I got to preempt very quickly for what ended up being my debut novel. However, my debut came out in 2020, about 6 days after we went into lockdown. So I went up to Clay's to see the book printed, saw it roll off the presses, which was an incredibly exciting experience, but unfortunately it rolled straight into a warehouse and didn't really kind of appear very much. So I think this time around with The Beach Party, it's really been my first, it's a bit like a debut experience, I would say. I've been very lucky, and it's been a fabulous experience to see it kind of in shops, on shelves, and outreaching readers. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
It's quite a journey, maybe a little bit different to some people's journeys. who get into this wonderful world of becoming an author. Now, The Beach Party, obviously, the new book, it's kind of getting a lot of acclaim. It's doing really, really well. Could you maybe share a little bit about what The Beach Party is about, just for people listening?
Yeah, sure, Simon. It's really a thriller, I guess, about the price you pay for past mistakes. It's what I guess in the kind of publishing industry they call it a destination thriller, because it's set abroad. It's set in Mallorca. It's about a group of six friends who go on holiday together in 1989 after they graduate. From Birmingham University, actually, to stay in a luxury villa which belongs to one of the group's parents. And they go obviously to party. They've just finished their degrees, but in the midst of all that kind of partying and decadence, it's a very luxurious villa with a boat and a jetty, and set on a cliff top in Dea in Mallorca. There's a terrible accident and somebody dies, and the friends begin to turn on one another to cover up what's happened. And that kind of leads to a rather horrifying conclusion. And then 30 years later, which is kind of current day, the secret they tried to bury resurfaces. Somebody knows what they did, and they're going to make them pay for it.
It's exciting. And look, you're no stranger to understanding the world of being optioned for TV. I know that's part of your background too. And it's sort of a wonderful. You could very easily see people streaming this story. I mean, it sort of comes to life. So that's fantastic. But tell me a little bit. We talked a little bit about your own sort of journey to becoming an author, to writing these, and obviously launching a book during the pandemic is difficult. A lot of bookshops are just shut down. You know, it was all online. But I'm interested in things like your titles, like The Guest, and also Look What You Made Me Do. And All in Her Head. Was there any sort of, the progression of that, I suppose, is what I'm teasing out here, to get from there to The Beach Party? Was it, when you look at them back, I know it's a little bit like, I suppose, a little bit like looking at your children, the books are very precious to us. But is there any linkage between your writing, or do you vision them as very separate silo projects?
I guess, I mean, they are all standalone books. So my first two books, All in Her Head was my debut, and that was followed by Look What You Made Me Do. The Guest isn't out actually until next year, July. But yeah, I mean, so they can be read obviously as standalone books. And I think debut authors, there's a kind of saying in the industry that there's a certain amount of autobiographical writing, I think, that goes into your debut, and I think that's probably true. I don't think authors do it consciously. I think that it's something, though, that comes out often subconsciously in their writing. I think my first two books were much more domestic kind of thrillers. They're set in the UK, and without wanting to kind of put in any major plot spoilers for the first book, it kind of concerns postpartum psychosis, which is not something that I actually suffered from, but I did have an incredibly traumatic birth with my second child. And I think that probably came out in some of the writing of that book. And I think that you learn as a writer, as you get more experience, to be able to kind of step away from you as a person and incorporating things that have happened to you in your writing, and be able to kind of think a bit more widely about different themes, and obviously different destinations as well, that I wanted to incorporate into my writing. So yes, I think that there is a marked change, and I think I would like to say anyway that I think you get better as a writer with more experience, and so some of those things that you want to kind of improve, or as certainly I want to improve, and I'm sure every author does with each book that they write. So I think my novels have got maybe pacier, which is probably better for thrillers, and maybe slightly less introspective. And I hope my characters are kind of developed more in the books that I've kind of gone on to write, and will continue to do so, hopefully. So yes,
Yeah,
that's absolutely
fantastic.
just a judge. Yeah.
That's wonderful. You also mentioned Sophie Lambert, who I know you work closely with. She represents you. But what's that relationship like? How important is that for a writer? Because you've kind of stuck with Sophie. It's kind of a winning combination. Have you any advice for people that are writing when it comes to sort of that relationship?
Yes, I would say your agent is really the person that you're going to hopefully have a relationship with for life over your writing career. So they're incredibly important to you. My editor actually is also very important to me, Harriet Borton. She was the lady who the editor who bought my first two books when she worked at Orion. She then moved to Viking at Penguin, and I followed her because we also have a very good working relationship. But that doesn't necessarily happen. It's much more common, I think, for people to keep their agent and not necessarily stay with the same publisher for all of their books. I've just been fortunate in that I've been lucky to do both. But I think your agent is really the most important person in your kind of writing career. You know, they're the person that gets you your deals. They're also the person who you can turn to for advice, who will help you manage your career. So it's really important that you get on with them, that you can trust them, and that you feel that the advice that they give you is worth listening to. And yeah, and that they can be very supportive. Some agents are very hands-on. They get involved in edits. Sophie reads my drafts before they will go to my editor, and kind of gives me feedback. So I've got a chance to kind of look at things again or correct things if there's something that she's said that doesn't chime quite right with something that I've written. So yeah, I think that they're absolutely vital. I mean, a lot of more authors self-publish now and they don't have agents. But for me, I really value having an agent. Yeah.
Well, that's great advice, Nikki. And when it comes to your own writing now, what do you love about what you do now? Because there's obviously a passion there, but what makes it so special for you? Why do you love it so much?
Um, God, that's an interesting question, actually. I've always loved writing. I think I was an avid reader as a child. You'd always find me kind of curled up in a corner somewhere with a book, probably starting far too young with things like Stephen King, and used to nick them off my parents' shelves and read stuff that was probably totally inappropriate. But I've always had an active imagination, and I love getting kind of words down on the page and telling a story. So I would also say that it's not necessarily everybody. I think a lot of people look at authors and just think, "Oh, wow, that's amazing! What a fantastic life! You can sit there and throw down a few words, and it all just flows, and that's great. And there's a book at the end of it." But it's an awful lot of hard work behind the scenes. You don't just write the book; you have to edit the book, and that can be quite difficult when your editor comes back with structural edits. So it's changed the plot or changed his character, or not that you have to, but their suggestions, and you value hopefully their opinion because they're much more experienced at this than you are. So, and you've obviously faced a blank page when you sit down in the morning. You might not feel like writing. It's a job that's very easy to go and kind of procrastinate, and go and clean the house or something instead. So you've got to have a lot of self-motivation to do it. But those days when the writing's flowing well, and you kind of lose yourself for an hour, and just completely wrapped up in your story, and really feel that you've written something that kind of takes you away from life, is just the best feeling to me ever. Yeah.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I like that. And you've brought me nicely onto something that I like to ask people who write, which is, do you have a particular routine or a style or a time of day, or do you go on the number of words? Because I know many authors have very different ways of going about it. Some it's ad hoc and it just pours out of them whenever it pours out of them. Others have a regimented routine where they're down at the desk and they've got to force out so many words a day. How does it work for you in that sort of creative way, Nikki?
Yeah, I think I'm a planner. I think if I was just writing whenever I felt like it would take me a lot longer to actually manage to get those 90,000 words down for a book. So I do plan quite extensively. I think that's probably the accountant in me still. I have spreadsheets, which a lot of my friends laugh at me for, but that really helps with the plotting. I think I find I can move things around easily and work out what I'm going to do. So I like to have kind of not that it doesn't necessarily change, because it does often when I'm writing, but I like to have planned the book to know where I'm going to start with. Not every single chapter, but I want to know roughly how the book's going to work. I find that then is less rewriting, basically, if I've really thought about it. And then I will sit down and I will try and write at least 1,000 words a day. And sometimes that doesn't take me, that could only take about, I don't know, 4 hours maybe, if it was a really good day. Other days it can take all day, and I'll still be coming back and writing after I've eaten in the evening. So yeah, I do try to stick to that. I wouldn't say I do it religiously every day, but pretty much I do, because otherwise I know that I'd fall behind on my schedule and I won't deliver on time.
Yeah, so somewhere between the spreadsheets, the routine, and the guardrails that you have, you get the work done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that, because I know other people that love the world of books and the world of writing. They love to hear a little bit about how people work, because it's not the same for everybody. It can be very different.
No, it's hugely different. I know a lot of my friends are, I think, what they call pantsers. So, they'll just sit down and they'll just start writing, and they can write a book like that. I'm just not like that. I have to plan. I like to know where I'm going.
Makes sense. Yeah. Okay. I want to move it on a little bit if I can. I want to ask you some other questions too, which is about, you must have been inspired along the way, whether it was those early Stephen King novels that you maybe shouldn't have been reading at that age, or whether it's people in your life that have given you a helping hand, or just people that you admire maybe within your industry. When I ask you that kind of question, what springs to mind for you, Nikki?
Um, well, I think there's a lot of authors, obviously, who I admire. I mean, Stephen King, obviously, being one of them. And and I think that the industry as a whole, I mean, I probably know crime authors more than anybody else, because that's the crime and thriller is the genre that I write in. And I find almost to a T, everybody is incredibly supportive. So that's been a real change, I think, from previous jobs that I've had in my career, because I wouldn't say necessarily that people are always like that. There's a lot of kind of competitiveness out there. And I thought that that's what it would be like being an author, because you want to kind of push your book and, get your book out there. But actually, you realize that it's not like that at all. Authors are incredibly supportive of one another, and they're just trying. Everybody is trying to get their book out there. But just because somebody reads somebody else's book, it doesn't mean that they're not going to read your book. There's kind of room for everybody. So I find that really refreshing, and I really enjoy working within this kind of industry. And I think. Oh goodness, in terms of other people, yes, I mean, obviously my family have been incredibly supportive. um, I think if my husband hadn't bought me that voucher for Christmas, then I perhaps never would have kind of gone down this route, because I just never thought it was something that I could do. I thought I tried once, failed, and then that was it. So yeah, I think that yes, yes,
Great. No, I
absolutely.
like that answer. Yeah. And I suppose it leads me on to something else, which is, if you were starting again tomorrow, as the first time, and you could do it all again, or if there's anybody out there watching or listening to this episode around the world and they want to get into this world that you're involved in, have you got any advice for them, or anything you would have done differently, or what advice could you pass on?
I would say learn as much about the publishing industry as you possibly can. I was incredibly naive when I wrote a novel after leaving university. I hadn't done any research, I didn't really understand how the industry worked. So I think finding out about that industry, and there are courses that you can go on, but you don't have to go on courses. You can just now look on the internet, and there's tons of information out there, which there obviously wasn't when I left university, because the internet didn't really exist like that. So find out about the industry. I would say that Twitter is also kind of a good place to kind of go on, follow authors that you like, that you admire, that you can kind of find out about them, look at who their agents are, look at who they represent, find out what they're looking for, and keep on top of the market of the genre that you want to write, so you understand what is already out there. There's no point in writing a book that somebody else has already written. obviously you can do it differently. I mean, there's probably only a certain number of stories that can be told, but if you produce something that is pretty much identical to something that came out last year, it's going to be very difficult to get a publishing deal. It needs to be unique. And then I would say, just be prepared to be incredibly resilient, because everybody has a huge number of rejections in this industry, or generally, unless you're exceptionally lucky. You do improve with time. If you can get yourself a mentor, or if you can find kind of trusted readers to read your book and be honest about it, I think that really helps. I think a lot of, or some of the people that I know who kind of have tried to write will often get family members to read it, but I think, or friends, and that can be useful, but you need people who will be honest with you. There's no point in somebody just saying what you've written is fantastic, because that's not actually helping you in terms of a long-term career. You need people who will be able to criticize it, and you need to be able to handle that criticism to be able to improve as a writer.
I think it's sage advice. It's very different to having a friend read it, telling you that you're great, and an editor coming back with lots of red ink and changes and character changes and, you know, structural changes.
Yes.
And you feel like it's your baby that somebody else is now
Yes.
changing it. There is that whole learning curve, isn't there? But it's great advice. Thank you, Nikki. Um, I mentioned the last thing I want to say, because I do want to squeeze a couple of quick questions in, but I also mentioned the guests, which I know doesn't come out to next year, so I hope I haven't given anything away.
No,
And of
not at all.
course, for people maybe listening to this and not just watching it, there's a lovely copy of the beach party just above your left-hand shoulder. And we do encourage people to rush out and get the beach party. But is there any sort of little inklings you can give us about the guests next year's book?
Yes, yes, it's available on Amazon to pre-order. Actually, it hasn't got a cover yet, so it'll be very interesting. I can't wait to see the cover, actually, because Charlotte, who designed the beach party cover, I think did a most fantastic job. So yes, I can't wait to see what the new one's like. But it's basically about a family who go on holiday to the Maldives to celebrate the father's 50th birthday. So there's him, his wife, and daughter, and they go to a private island for one of those picnics that you can have. And the boat comes to pick them up a few hours later, and they've all disappeared. So the question is, what happened to the Hamiltons, and where did they go, and why?
I'm hooked already, Nikki. I'm hooked already. Listen, thank you for that. And look, before we come to the end of our time today, I want to ask you a little bit about your planning process. Obviously, you've got this other book that you're working on. You've got all the promotion that comes with getting the message out for the beach party. Is that all in a spreadsheet? How do you go about planning? What's on your roadmap for the next 6, 12, 24 months? How does that work for you in your area?
Yes, it is juggling. I think there's a lot of juggling. Yes, it's not so much on a spreadsheet actually, that, but everything is in my diary. Otherwise, if it's not in my diary, it doesn't get done. So um, I am doing, as you say, a bit of promotion around the beach party at the moment, and I should imagine that will kind of carry on until the end of August, kind of September time. And then I'm hoping by then I will have had another idea and planned another idea for the next book. But I'm also doing edits for the guests as well. So the main edits have already been done. We're just kind of down to the final kind of line edits. So I think that's something, as an author, you also have to be prepared. Unfortunately, it's not, you can't put it into boxes in terms of, I'm just going to write this book and then I'll write the next book. You're constantly doing lots of things at the same time. And also juggling. I've got two daughters. They're both older now. There's kind of, it's an 18-year-old and an almost 18-year-old and a 16-year-old. But I tend to work around this, try and give myself a bit of time off in the school holidays to spend with them as well. So I'm hoping to be able to do some of that in August, and then get my head back down again in September to really kind of concentrate till at least kind of Christmas, January, to write the next one. So yeah, just a constant rotation.
It
Yes,
sounds both fun and busy in the same measure. So that's
exactly.
great.
Yes.
And look, finally, Nikki, is there anything else you'd like to share with our worldwide audience today, or anything that we haven't mentioned that you want to bring up, or maybe something we've talked about already that you want to double down on? And secondly, and really importantly, If people want to grab a copy of The Beach Party or find out more about your writing, where do you want to send people to?
I would say just have a look on my Amazon page, actually. I have got a website myself as well. If they just look up Nikki Smith author, it'll come up. But all the books are on Amazon. And if you follow me on Twitter, I'm at Mrs. Smith Monday for however long Twitter is still with us for. At the moment, it seems to be a little bit up and down, or X as they now call it, which I hate personally. But yeah, but Twitter as it used to be, yes. And in terms of coming back to anything, no, I don't think that there is really. Yeah, there's nothing I can think of anyway. So it's just been really nice to have a chat with you and lovely to be on your podcast.
Well, listen, thank you so much, Nikki. That brings us lovely to the end of this episode. We encourage everybody to rush out immediately and grab The Beach Party and to pencil in the guests for when it's launched next year. Continued success in everything that you're doing. Thank you to everybody who's been watching or listening to this episode with Nikki Smith from around the world. And I hope that you'll join me back here. Thank you, Nikki. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you. Continued success with The Beach Party and everything that you're doing.
Thanks so much, Simon. It's been absolutely lovely to be here. Thank you. And I'll be hopefully back next year and I can talk to you a bit more about the guests then.
We'll hold you to it. Thanks, Nikki.